All right, welcome everyone to today's Title Topics webinar. These are ALTA's free presentations we offer every month on issues important to title professionals across the country. I am Jeremy Yohe, ALTA's Vice President of Communications, and today we've got a great webinar lined up to help you learn how to differentiate your title company by standing out during the entire transaction at the closing table. And apparently there's a lot of people that are intrigued by this topic. We had more than 900 people register. So fantastic, and thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk about some of the various new technologies that companies have, a lot of cool tools that are out there to help keep customers informed about the transaction, and that are really helping you all, complete deals easier. Our experts today will share some of their successful strategies that make their customers come back for more. Before starting, I just need to touch on a few housekeeping items. A copy of today's presentation can be downloaded from the GoToWebinar handout section. All participant lines are muted for today's presentation. If at any time you have a question, please submit them through the questions box. We'll hold some time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. As an added benefit, today's presentation is being recorded. After we've got the file edited, you'll be able to access the recording on ALTA's website at alta.org/title topics. That's alta.org/title topics, and you'll also get an email tomorrow with a link that will take you directly to the recording. I do need to thank Fidelity National Title Group for sponsoring our Title Topics webinars this year. Their support allows us to provide these educational opportunities free of charge. With that out of the way, let me briefly introduce today's speakers. First, we have Andy Bolin. Andy is president of Celebrity Title Company in Texas. We also have Brian Cooper. Brian is president of Unified Title Company in Colorado. And also joining us is Bill Saboto. Bill is co-founder of Close Simple, which provides tools that help title companies communicate with their customers. And with that, Bill, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. And thank you, Alta. This is going to be a fun hour together. As we kind of put this panel together, I'm going to be serving as the moderator today, kind of adding value, pulling out some key questions from Andy and Brian. Our goal at the end of this hour is really that each of you on this webinar, pretty much a record-breaking webinar for Alta, that each of you can grab something, take it, apply it to your business. Each of us are going to be resources if you have questions, but we're really specific in like who we pick to be on this webinar. I'll kind of give an overview of Andy and Brian, and along they can kind of fill in some context. But Andy's title company out of Houston, Texas, they do about 200 closings per month. They're crushing it. They've been making a name for themselves on social media. The customer experience is a very high thing. And then Brian Cooper, he's out of Colorado, larger title agent doing around 1,000 deals a month. So as we're kind of going through this next hour, it's going to be important just to think about your title company, the size you're at, where you want to be at someday, and maybe applying the principles to that. Andy and Brian, do you just kind of want to give a quick hello, and then we'll kind of dig into some of the teaching and then more of digging into the topic. Andy, you want to add anything?
Good morning. Thank you for joining us, and I'm really excited to share and to learn from Brian. Brian probably doesn't remember, but part of our success at Celebrity is based on a conversation that he had at TLTA a few years ago.
Nice.
Very nice. Well, good morning. This is Brian Cooper in Colorado, or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's just interesting with our industry and the direction it's going. I thought these questions were really timely and good for a lot of people, and I'd love to hear some feedback as well from some of the attendees.
Great. Well, as all of you can see, if you're an attendee right now, we got a ton of you on here. We do have the chat thing open on the side. Feel free to drop any questions as we go along with this. To begin this presentation, though, we're just going to zoom out really big picture and kind of hit on this topic of making yourself remarkable and why marketing really needs to start with creating a great closing experience. So that's going to be about 10 minutes, and then we're going to dig right into more of the panel time. Really the core of this topic, though, that we're going to be hitting on today is how to get ahead and stay ahead in a crowded and competitive market. That's really what we're trying to do. That's why each of you signed up for this webinar, because you want to know how to do this. You know your cities, you know your states, and you're looking for that little nugget that you can take back. Before this call, it was really cool. As a panel, we were talking about, what does the industry look like? Like, what can we relate it to? And Brian actually threw this out. He was like, you know, I don't want to be a taxi company with Uber circling. I don't want to be that company that's just been doing this same thing for years. Meanwhile, there's this other thing over there, and they're just taking up market share. Brian, do you want to just kind of hit on that? And then I think that kind of sets up, you know, the next point that we're going to be making. But how did that come out of your mind? You know, how did you come up with that idea? The Uber and taxi.
Oh, I've been in the industry for about 28 years, and sometimes it seems like 2 to 3 years, and sometimes it seems like 40 plus. But you know, the bottom line is there are more and more disruptions in our business, and there are more and more attacks on our business, and more and more concerns. So I look at it, and I don't run off of fear, but I do. And I think if you take your foot off the gas, that's when you wake up and you're the taxi company going, what just happened to me? And you look at the people entering into the market. If you look at, you know, certain states, people putting pressure on pricing and that kind of thing, it's concerning. So I think we always have to do what we can day in and day out to fight and keep fighting for our industry and fighting for our space. I think the day you get complacent and the day you sit back and start counting your money is the day that you go away, quite honestly. So to me, that's the best analogy, that you have to keep learning, you have to keep growing, and you got to keep surrounding yourself with the right people that are on that same path.
I think that could almost be on a t-shirt there. The day that you stop, be complacent, count your money, sit back, you know, that could be right there on a t-shirt. Andy, you brought up something just in your market, something you've seen along that line. Hit on that kind of more local, how this hit you.
So what we talked about previously is just that the competition is getting more and more fierce, and it's growing. We are in one of our primary counties. We have 130 other title companies the last time I checked. So that means that the difference, and they continue to move into the space. And as they do, it thins out the business. And so you really have to set up your business on relationships. It's part of the reason why our slogan is Partners in Life and not just business, is that those relationships are going to matter. So as those new title companies come in and those new objections come in that we're going to use this company, or this is what this is going to look like, we're able to really rely on those relationships at the core of how we grow.
Yeah. And you mentioned one new company coming in. They already have 4 offices, and it's just been, you know, they're more national. And it's really, that's what a lot of people are feeling right now. So it's how do we really compete against them? Let's dig right into this kind of topic, the idea of the closing experience. I want to hit on this point here. Before we even talk about how do we do it, I want to ask this question to each of you that are listening to this panel right now, everybody, the hundreds of people in Alta. What have you been talking about lately? Is there something that you've experienced that you just can't stop talking about? I'll get to why this is important, but I got on the screen here a picture of some AirPods. A few months ago, actually about a year ago, I got my first pair of AirPods. And I got these things, if you're unfamiliar with them, they're just wireless microphones and a headset that you can listen to music on or talk on the phone with. They plug right into your iPhone. And I got these after seeing people walking around, you know, walking for years with them in their ears. Finally, I decided to get them, put them in my ears one day, and my life was forever changed. I couldn't imagine talking on the phone without a pair of AirPods. I'm doing this webinar right now with my AirPods in. Everything changed. And I remember the day though I came into my office here, and we got a whole team of developers, and I got my AirPods in my ears, and I tell my guys, I'm like, guys, these AirPods are so cool, this and that. And I go on this rant for like 5 minutes about it. Our lead developer, Panad, is just sitting back. He kind of chuckles and he goes, Bill, those things have been out for like 2 years already. Way to get on the bandwagon. And, you know, since that day though, like my excitement for AirPods has not changed. I still love them the same, and I tell everybody about them. Whenever I see somebody just, you know, walking with an old pair of headphones with a cable on it, I'm like, dude, you need AirPods. It's my topic of conversation because it's changed my life. My question that I'd love to be able to go back to throughout this conversation is, what have you been talking about lately? Is there a restaurant, a relationship? Maybe it's some new clothes, a trip. Maybe it's a band, a song, a concert you were at. Something. What's the last thing that since you experienced it, you just couldn't get it out of your mind and you kept bringing it up in conversation? Why this is important, though, is because I believe that in the world of options, we have endless amount of options today. You chose something. For me, it was these AirPods. It's something that I've been talking about like crazy. But for you, it might be something else. But there are endless amount of things that you could have chose, but you chose those for one reason. And what I really think that kind of segues to is we got to realize that our real competition in the market isn't just the title company down the street. Our real competition is the companies that our customers are really comparing us to, that they're experiencing every day. Netflix, Zappos, Nike, Apple. We got a bunch on the screen here. You can see them all. But consumers right now, when they get their title process, they're looking at it going, why can't I just fill in the blank? Because when I go to Zappos, I can. Or why can't I? Or why does the title process fill in the blank? Because Amazon allows me to. We got to realize this as kind of a baseline. The real competition isn't just what the next title company is doing. It's really what the consumer is feeling and experiencing every single day when they're not even thinking about title. So that brings us back kind of to this point. How do we get ahead and stay ahead in a crowded and competitive market? I would say, and this is the baseline for this entire webinar, it's this. We got to make something remarkable. We got to make something worth talking about. Going back to my AirPods story, those were remarkable to me. They were literally worth talking about. Every person that I met that had an old pair of headphones in with the cords or something crazy, I had to talk to them about it because it changed my life. It was something so worthy of talking about that I couldn't hold it in. And that's what I want to talk about today, this idea of making something remarkable. On the screen here, I have a purple cow. And this can kind of be a good picture for what this is going to look like. A few years ago, there was an author named Seth Godin, a big marketing guy, and his name is there on the screen right behind the cow. But he wrote a book called Purple Cow. The entire concept of this book was simple. His wife has an illness where whenever she's in the car or any moving vehicle, an airplane, a train, she falls asleep. She has no choice, but she just falls asleep. Well, one day, Seth, his wife, and his two kids are in the countryside of England, and they're driving through. And his kids are in the back seat and they're yelling like any kids naturally would. They're fighting and whatever. And his wife, because of her illness, is passed out. She just fell asleep. Well, in a moment though, his kids stopped yelling, stopped fighting, doing whatever they were doing. And they looked out the window, and Seth is driving. They look out the window, they stop yelling, they stop fighting. And then they come back a second later and they keep yelling and fighting. And that got Seth thinking. He was like, what captured their attention enough to make them stop yelling for a few seconds there? And he looked in his rearview mirror and he saw a regular old black and white dairy cow. And he had this epiphany in that moment. And he thought to himself, you know what? That cow, it was just a normal cow. It wasn't worth them saying, Dad, there's a cow back there. Pull over the car. We got to see that cow. And he thought to himself, though, if that cow was something different, if it was a purple cow, my kids would have gone crazy. They would have lost it. They would have shook my wife and said, Mom, wake up. There's a purple cow. They would have yelled at me, Dad, stop the car, pull backwards. We got to go back there. There's a purple cow. And Seth Godin had this big epiphany of, that's what it looks like in business. That's what we need to be thinking about, creating a purple cow, not just something that's normal, something that's worth stopping, pulling the car over and taking pictures about, talking about, interrupting everything. So that's really what I believe it looks like. Now, what does remarkable really mean in the context of the conversation we're going to be having today? And what does it really look like? I think it all starts with one thing, not doing and saying the same thing everyone else is doing. I really believe in title. We need to change the conversation. We need to look at this and go, everybody's heard title. Real estate agents have heard about title for years and they still don't understand it better. You know, what we really have to be thinking about is, how do we change the conversation from what every other title company is doing and saying to something else that makes a real estate agent or a consumer go, I want to use that title company because that title company does fill in the blank. As a few examples before we kind of give it over to our panel about what this can look like though, I just want to hit on a few industries, three specifically that I think have done a great job of changing the conversation. This company, Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans, has changed the way we look at mortgage. When they came out a few years ago with Rocket Mortgage, they didn't talk about mortgages. They talked about click button, get mortgage. It was about the simplicity. It wasn't even about the mortgage. It was about how easy it was to get the mortgage. Their first ad, I think, was on the Super Bowl, and it didn't even talk about mortgages. It talked about how people like rockets and how they probably don't like mortgages. But if they like rockets and they don't understand mortgages, they're going to love Rocket Mortgage. And they married these two things together to make something that in consumers' minds, it was all about simplicity. It was no longer about mortgage. It was about click button, get mortgage. Another brand that's done a great job of changing the conversation and making something remarkable, I believe, is Jimmy John's. If you're unfamiliar with Jimmy John's, this is a sandwich sub company. And in a world where every single sandwich and sub company, you think of Quiznos, you think of Subway, a list of places, Jersey Mike's, Jimmy John's realized they can't just talk about subs, they have to do something different. So when I say Jimmy John's, a lot of people, the first thought that comes into your mind is something that's unrelated to subs. It's freaky fast. Because Jimmy John's made a name for themselves by being freaky fast with delivery, being freaky fast with how they make the subs. When you order, you watch it being made for you, and it's like 30 seconds. Everything Jimmy John's did was talking about the speed of the sub being made and delivered, not about the sub. They changed the conversation. And if you go to any big metro city, you're going to see Jimmy John's on street corners. You're going to see them all over because Jimmy John's is one of the most popular sub companies in the world. The last company that I just want to hit on here as an example is Zappos, because Zappos has done a remarkable job of changing the conversation from just shoes to service. If you order with Zappos, when they started, the biggest thing that everybody would talk about with Zappos wasn't about the shoes they got. It was about the free returns. You could buy any shoe, try it on. If you didn't like it, send it back for free. Now, e-commerce companies, if they don't offer free returns, something is wrong. But now, when you think of buying shoes online as a result, who do you think about? Zappos. Everything they've done isn't about shoes, it's about the customer. They don't want to talk about shoes if you call them. They want to talk about what you want to do with the shoes. They want to find out what you're going to do this weekend because they care more about the person than the product that you're buying, because they know that they can help guide you to the right product if they understand you. So they've effectively changed the conversation around the way people buy shoes online. Now, what does that mean? This is the question that's going to be setting up the rest of this conversation. How are you going to change the conversation with your customers to differentiate yourself from the competition? Basically, what's going to be your purple cow? That's what we're going to be talking about today. The three topics are going to be this: creating a closing process that attracts the attention of real estate agents. The second thing we're going to be talking about, creating a closing process that's unforgettable for the consumers. And the third thing we're going to be wrapping it up with is how to stay in touch post-closing to remain top of mind for future referrals and deals. So that's going to be where this webinar takes us over the next 45 minutes. And again, if you have any questions, hit us up in the chat thing. The first way, though, that I look at making a remarkable closing process is creating a closing process that attracts the attention for real estate agents. So I want to just start off by asking Andy and Brian this. What do real estate agents want? What have you been experiencing in your market? Andy, maybe you could start with that.
Well, what we've been experiencing really comes down to the first conversation or the conversations we have during, we call it the dating phase, when we meet new real estate agents, and our marketing team, our success team is out on the street. And it's really, what is it about the experiences that you've had before? And what are you looking for? Like, what is your ultimate experience? And we're able to cater our business to each individual agent. They really take great pride in making those notes and being able to relate to the people that we work with, and we are lucky to work with one-on-one. So our initiative isn't to close every deal or to work with every agent. We want to work with agents that are like us, like-minded like us. I mean, because otherwise it's not going to really work for us. So we cater the way that we do our transaction to that specific agent. And it's the same thing that they always say. It's communication. It's always comes down to being communicated with and not finding out things the last minute. And so we've put things in place in order to communicate with them thoroughly throughout the entire process.
And we'll hit on some of those, but I think that's pretty interesting that communication is the thing that real estate agent after real estate agent just says, hey, if you could communicate with me better, that would be awesome. Brian, what have you heard?
Well,
I love that
what,
dating
Bill,
thing too. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so true. Bill, to back up what you said, I agree with that 100%. I mean, there's nothing sexy about title. It's all steak and no sizzle. It's not your enjoyable 2-hour dinner conversation typically. So, and to piggyback off of what Andy said, I agree 100%. That dating phase is so important for us. If we hone in on our escrow process or our process overall, we can get as fancy as we want. We've tried and it doesn't work. It always comes down to 3 things. It's communication, number one. And communication, by the way, from our standpoint, is it's the best customer service comes from communication and how people want to be communicated with. In that dating phase, I think you have to ask those questions. More and more millennials, they want to text. They don't want to email, and they don't want to call. We have to ask those questions. So you look at that purple cow analogy. We can't keep doing the things we've done the last 30 years because things have changed. Number 2, it's effective, efficient, and consistent. And I think consistent is the optimal word as far as internal systems, escrow and title. If you don't have those, doesn't matter what you're talking about, you're not going to be able to deliver. And then thirdly, it's building a team who truly cares about the outcome. And I think the major switch we've made here a few years ago, which has made a massive difference in our market share and the service that we offer, is we don't train people to be happy. We hire people that are already happy and we train them. So we've had good success in hiring people outside of just your title industry people who really care, and then we teach them everything else. So, with that said, I think a VIP sheet to go along with Andy's idea of dating, to ask the questions: what do you like? What do you not like? Do you want a hug? Do you want a handshake? Do you want a call? Do you want an email? And then when that particular escrow officer is out and the next person is filling in, they're not just playing a guessing game, and that helps you with consistency, and that's being proactive, honest, and it's I think the bottom line is knowing and doing the things that make the real estate agent look great for their buyer and seller, and everything else takes care of itself.
Got it. I love that idea of hiring happy too. Don't train for happy, hire happy, because I hear this business after business, title company after title company. It's talking about real estate agents love their closer, their escrow officer, because just that person's so friendly, because the realtor knows what's going to happen. It's consistent, like you said in number 2. It's effective, it's efficient, and because that person communicates. So you kind of start with the happy, and I think that covers a multitude of sins in some way. Start there. If you don't have that, it's going to be hard to work with somebody. I love those points.
Can I add one more thing to that? I think the most crucial thing about what we do is hiring the right people, training the right people, and staffing the right people. To hire the right person and put them in the wrong position is a massive mistake, and we do that all too often in this industry. Oftentimes we hire too late. We're never perfectly staffed, right? We're either overstaffed or understaffed based on volumes, but to get those people in, probably the most effective thing we've done is role play internally, and people up front like it. It's embarrassing, but there's no better way to train anybody other than the role playing that I've found anyhow. So anyhow, wanted to add that.
Jeremy, maybe we can have a separate webinar someday on just role playing for hiring, like what that looks like. That'd be pretty interesting. I want to take the conversation here. As we think about the process that attracts a real estate agent, you both kind of talked really about what's going on in your businesses. I want to talk on a little bigger picture now and just go like this. What companies have you both experienced that have set a standard for what that looks like? And how do you apply those things to your businesses? You know, if you're the customer, if you're the person that wants to be attractive, what companies have really set the standard for you? And do you talk to your company about your experiences there? Andy, you had a great one to start with.
So my two that we really use right now, so I'll start with Sephora. If anybody here has ever been into a Sephora, then maybe you know a little bit about this, but I'll give you an example and why we use them in a different respect. But at Sephora, I had gone into the store and I was in a section and needed some help. And I had asked somebody in the next aisle over to assist me, and they said they couldn't assist me because they were assigned to only that section. And I would have to wait for the person assigned to my section to be free with the customer that they were helping. So I kind of thought about that, took my stuff, didn't purchase anything from Sephora, and walked out the door. And we apply that to our business here, is that we don't work in units. Like, you are not assigned, regardless of the title that you have at this company, like everyone can do everything. So I never want anyone to say, I don't do that, or you have to wait for so-and-so to get off the phone to have a conversation with you, because that's not my section. So everyone is responsible for the success that happens. My new favorite, and it's something that I picked up probably 6 to 8 months ago, and this company is only in the Southeast, but it's Chicken Salad Chick. And I
have not heard of that yet.
Oh, Chicken Salad Chick is so awesome. But I went in there to get some lunch, and I sat down on a bench to wait for my order to be ready. And this man just came and sat next to me and just started having a conversation. So we talked, and he asked what I did and how my experience was and what made me come in. So we're just chatting, and I find out when I get ready to leave, I introduce myself to him, and he's the owner of that franchise.
Wow.
So I came back and started then. Everyone, like once a day, I'll go out into one of my offices and into the lobby and just sit down and talk to the customers that are sitting there and just have a conversation
Love that.
about their experience, about how the process went for them. And it's not until they get up to go into the closing room, or they're getting their check, or whatever their process is, that they find that I actually introduce myself to them and then thank them for coming in.
Love that. So don't be like Sephora, be like Chick Salad
Chicken
Chick.
Salad
Is that
Chick.
it? Chicken Salad Chick. I love it. Well, the reason I like this question though is because we get so focused on title, even talking about our competition, or we forget, you know, again, going back to that one of the first slides, our real competition is the next company the customer experiences, not the next title company. So sometimes it's good just to get above the water and kind of look around and go like, what else is out there? You know, get a little head out of the clouds and go, okay, here's some other businesses that are crushing it. Brian, what businesses come to mind when we ask this, and why?
Well, in no particular order, the three that come to mind are Discount Tire. I think they're national, but I don't know that for fact. Chick-fil-A and Nordstrom's. My thinking changed here some time ago when I started studying, and I was learning from a mentor that there's a big difference between customer service and customer experience. And if you ask 10 people what the difference is, probably 8 or 9 are going to say, it's the same thing. And it's not. I promise you it's not. Customer service is, it's reactive. It's when somebody walks into your lobby, do you greet them or not? Do you stand up? Do you handshake? Do you smile? Do you treat them with warmth? Do you offer them coffee or a Coke or that kind of thing? Customer experience is being proactive. And it's like Disney teaches, it's anticipating what their needs are. It's calling them in advance with the situation and really over communicating, as we went before. And if you look at the best companies, for instance, Disney, they offer both customer service and customer experience, and that's for unified title statewide. That's what we strive for daily. And it's not just one staff meeting. It's not a memo. It's not an email. It's not a personal review. It has to be a consistent conversation day in and day out, or you don't make progress on it. But Discount Tire, it doesn't. You know what I admire so much about Discount and Chick-fil-A I mean, the products are fantastic, right? But you go there, it's consistent. And these people, doesn't matter what the age of the employee is, they are polite,
Yeah,
they're professional, they're courteous, and they are trained very, very well. They don't have bad days. If they do, they don't show it.
love that. That's a great point. They hire happy too then.
Oh, absolutely. You can't teach happy. A lot of things
Yeah.
that I certainly can't teach, but if they have those qualities, the intangibles, you can teach them everything else if they're willing.
And why Nordstrom?
You know, Nordstrom's, they're trained very, very well. I took our leadership team. A lot of Nordstroms, people don't know this, but a lot of Nordstroms will allow you to host, unless they've changed this in the last year, to host a meeting there. For instance, a leadership team meeting. And
Wow.
so during that meeting, they offered the room, no cost, coffee, that kind of thing. And then I asked them to come in and talk, and they spoke on the absolute vital importance of hiring right, onboarding right. Onboarding is absolutely crucial to success. And then monitoring, where results are measured, results increase typically. So, they're taught to treat people as truly clients and not just somebody looking to go in and buy a shirt or a pair of shoes or that kind of thing. So Nordstrom's, I mean,
Love that.
stands out. I never shopped Nordstrom's before, but some of the experiences I've had there are just unbelievable. I mean, they anticipate what your needs are, period.
And that's very easy to apply to your team. Hey, we're going to go here. And now I bet everybody on this call is like, I got to call my local Nordstrom and see if I can get in there. That's really cool, Brian.
Yeah, hopefully I didn't set Nordstrom's up for failure there, but to me, I mean,
we'll find out.
You drive the same way to work, right? You park, you go in, our people don't have outside influence. So I think it's our job to help give them that so they can see our industry in a different light.
What I think is so remarkable about all these examples here is they're doing exactly what we talked about. They're changing the conversation. You're not talking about going into Nordstrom's to buy a shirt. You're talking about their conference rooms and their culture. We're not talking about Chick-fil-A and their sandwich. We're not talking about, I forget, Andy, what your name is. The
chicken salad.
Chicken salad. You don't even bring up what you're buying there. You're talking about the experience going in, and I think that's so powerful. So here's kind of my takeaway question for everybody that's watching this right now, and I love it. The numbers are just so high of how many people are here. When was the last time you asked your best real estate agents what they wanted out of a closing experience, and for any ideas on how to make it better? I think I love that idea of the dating that Andy, you brought up, but when's the last time any of us watching this webinar actually dove deep into the customer experience, as Brian said it, different than just service, but experience, the proactive, the anticipating of needs. How do we get there? I think we do have to interact with real estate agents more on a level of, what could we do? And I think it's important to get these outside ideas because that creates a context for it. Let's hop into the next point here. Really, if we're going to talk about creating a remarkable experience, a remarkable closing and growing, I think it's how do we create an unforgettable experience though for consumers? Let's just throw it out to you guys right away. What do you think an unforgettable experience for consumers looks like? What are you doing right now to make it unforgettable? Something that they just couldn't. They're like, wow, I love Celebrity. I love Unified. I'll never dream of going somewhere else. Maybe Brian, would you start with it?
Sure. From our standpoint, again, getting back to the basics and your four pillars is it's hiring the right people and it's training them. And we remind our staff on a regular basis that with residential deals, there's typically a ton of emotion involved. You never know what's walking through that door. Did the people just go through a divorce? Did somebody pass away? Are they selling the house after 42 years where they saw the kids grow up and they still have the line markings of, the kids growing on the walls? So we cannot look at these as another transaction, get in, get out, get in, get out. We have to look at them from that standpoint. So we spend a lot of time training our first impressions people They stand up, they greet, they smile, they calm emotions down immediately. We have music, light music playing in our lobbies with the TV on, and no, just because you want them to walk in one emotional state and then automatically transition into something else. We show them to their room, offer them fresh cookies, that kind of thing. And then our closers, the same thing. The escrow officer, when they walk into the room, it's not just sit down and dive in. They introduce, they ask a couple questions. So it starts with that, and it all comes down to communicate. It is hard to separate yourself in this industry, but those are things that also goes to staffing. We've had realtor after realtor tell us that when they go to some competitors' offices, some lights aren't on. I don't care if we don't have any closings today, every light's going to be on in case somebody comes in, because that sends a message. But when they walk in, we're staffed appropriately, period, because we're not going to have an escrow officer making cookies, answering the front phones, washing windows, and doing a closing at the same time. And that adds to, I think, the consumer's overall experience.
The little things, the lights, something that's so easy to just forget about. Yeah.
And again, that goes back to role playing, and we role play anything and everything internally, because we can't hire people and expect them to give Nordstrom's type of service if we don't train them. That's our job to train them.
Yes. And I think we'll come back to like what role playing looks like, because I'd love to ask you a couple of questions on that. And I'm sure people are kind of wondering how you do that, and like whiteboard session. We'll see if we have more time on that too, because that's really cool. Andy, what do you think? Like, how does this look for you?
So I want to say that I 100% agree with Brian in regards to role playing. It's something that we do as well with our team when we bring on new team members. We kind of have a process set up where they don't even touch a file, touch a customer for at least 2 weeks when they join the team, because we have them onboarding, we have them role playing. We even have them watching company created on-demand webinars for every process in our system, so that everyone does the same thing. And it's not, regardless if we bring you in, because we bring in a lot of people from outside of this industry and train. It's my favorite thing to do. And I would rather do that all day long than recycle from other title companies. And when we do bring people in from other title companies, we don't use that language here where I did it this way, where I was at. That's just not language that we have here. So that way everyone is doing the consistent thing. For our experience, some of you may have heard this before. One of the things that we do that makes us stand out from any other title company in our space is, rather than having just a standard snacks in the closing room and pizza brought in and sandwich, like, we send a menu out to our customers the day before closing. And depending on whether or not they're closing at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock at night, there are options for them to choose from. And so they actually, if they so choose, they have a meal at closing that they selected. So it's one of
cool. What is it? How do you do it? You just email it to, you email like a PDF, or like, do they go to your website to select it? What do you do?
So we use this system called Close Simple that sends out automated emails and text messages. And it's one of our steps in our Close Simple process that right before the closing, it's called the menu. And our team just goes in and hits a button, and it attaches a PDF. That PDF goes out to all of the people party to the transaction. And they just email back a response of what they would like to eat. And as long as we have it 2 hours before closing, we've created great relationships with Panera, and that's the company that we use. And we order the food, and Panera delivers it to our office. And so it's ready for closing. The relationship has bode well for both of us, so that if we even have a slow month, the manager at Panera will call me and be like, Andy, is there anything that I can do to help? Did something happen? Is service not good? And I'm like, no, it's just a slow month. It's fine. I'm sorry that I affected your P&L.
Thanks for rubbing it in.
Yeah.
Thanks for rubbing it in. Yeah. Thanks for rubbing that in on me.
Exactly.
Boy,
every buyer.
Here's a question.
Sure.
Yeah. Just a question. What if somebody doesn't get back to you with the 2 hour thing? Like, what do you do then? Do you just order like a bunch of cookies, or like, what do you do?
If they walk in the door and they say, I forgot to send my order in, we have somebody on the team that will drive over. Every Panera location just thankfully the way the world is, the universe has worked out, is within a 3-minute drive from our offices. So they will drive and pick it up. Otherwise, we do have cookies and snacks and chips and all of those things staged in all of our closing rooms, if they just want a snack and don't want a meal. And then if somebody has dietary needs, well, we'll meet those as well. Then the other thing too is we think that the buying a home is exciting, and we want to be part of that celebration with them. And we're just thankful for being such a small part of the process. So every closing, the client gets a bottle of wine. So
wow.
We, again, I have a relationship with Trader Joe's, and we pick up our wine, and it's funny because our agents know they call it $2 Chuck, and it's not about the $2 or the $4 bottle of wine. We label it with our own label and say sip sip hooray, and it's just that another extension of like, we make them look really good because we care about their clients as much as they do.
That's so key. If we're going to make an experience for the consumer, it's going to directly reflect the realtor who referred them over. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. I love it, Andy. I want to just hit on this. We already brought up Chick-fil-A. I think Chick-fil-A has done a great job of doing this little thing. You know, we've talked in the last point about how companies, we talk about what our experience with them, not necessarily the product. Chick-fil-A has made a huge name for themselves by just saying the words, my pleasure, when you ask them to do something. You know, they've changed the entire way fast food industry works. Now, if you go to a McDonald's or anywhere and it's like, hey, could I have an extra ketchup? And they don't say my pleasure, you go, you know, because Chick-fil-A does it, and they've just raised the bar a little more. I love how they've done that. And I'd like to kind of end this point by just saying this, you know, let's not overcomplicate it. If it could benefit the customer, do it now. You know, Andy, that's exactly what you're doing with that Panera. I love it, Brian, with the lights, such a simple little thing, but don't overcomplicate it. What does the customer deserve? Let's just do it. Let's think of things that will make them go, that company is sharp. I always like to say, you know, I love trying to raise the bar to make it harder on my competition, but I really love raising the bar because I think that's what the customer deserves. You know, it's more about what the customer deserves than just making it harder on the competition. But Andy, I remember when you shared that Panera story at Springboard just this past year, everybody in the room, their jaws dropped. It was like, she does what? She has a Panera menu she sends? And I love it because it benefits the customer. It's the customer first. And that's super important. For everybody watching this webinar, here's kind of a takeaway question that I'd love you to think about. What are 2 things that you offer or you could offer to your customers that are distinctly different than your competition to show that you care more? What are 2 things? I could ask for 1, but I'd love to just stretch you and go, what are 2 things that you're currently doing or could do that it will separate you? Maybe it's doing like Andy said, you know, a Panera lunch. Maybe it's like Brian said, just keeping the lights on, you know, having the right TV in the waiting room. Maybe it's redoing your waiting room. You know, what does this look like that will make you different than the competition? Before we head into our last point here, I think this is a really cool thing. Each person on this webinar, you took an hour out of your day, one of the busiest seasons of the year, to get poured into and really hopefully take away a few ideas from this that you can implement. But I just want to ask this, for the 2 people on this, the webinar here, Andy and Brian, right now, where are you turning to? Where are you finding new inspiration ideas? Is it podcasts, books, mentor groups? How are you 2 getting poured into outside of just, you know, being busy in your company? What does that look like? Andy, maybe you can start.
Perfect. There's a question really quick, Bill, that I want to go back to regarding the cost of the meals and whether or not those are added into our closing costs. That is a cost for us of doing business. And if you want to know the money aspect of it, we've averaged it out to $7 a meal. There's typically 4 meals that are ordered at a closing. It's kind of how we have it budgeted. And that's $28 a closing. that to me, that experience for the customer is way more impactful than having a one-on-one meeting with an agent at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. So it's just the cost of doing business, and it's built into our budget as a whole complete separate line item so that I'm able to track it. So
Yeah.
it's not built into our closing costs.
Cool.
Okay, so as far as where I find inspiration and ideas, yes, I am an avid podcaster listener. On the way home, on the way to work, I typically need to turn my brain off a little bit more than I do, and yet I don't. I listen to a handful of podcasts, coaching for leaders, entree leadership, and every once in a while I'll listen to Rise, the podcast with Rachel Hollis. That's an every once in a while. But those entree leadership and coaching for leaders are probably two of my favorites. And then Second City Works. I get a lot of it fills me rather than being able to get ideas. It just is like this refreshing approach of like what other people are doing and then how I can turn what they're doing and utilize it in the title world. As far as books, I read a book a week. Typically it's a leadership book.
How do you find time? How do you find time?
I follow a calendar. So
Nice.
I schedule that into my day. Whether it's I read an hour a night before I'm able to do this other thing that I want to do. I just make it a priority. I mean, I want to grow and I don't want my brain to ever get tired and rest. So I read a book a week. I would say that in those 52 weeks, 40 to 45 of those books are all going to be related to like business and leadership and growth. And every time somebody comes out with a new book, like if we had my camera on, you'd see my office is covered in books. And then maybe 7 to 10 of those books are like trash, just to like clear out the cobwebs every once in a while. My favorite thing that I get to do is I'm a business coach. So I coach other industries. And as I'm coaching them to grow their businesses, and we talk about how they grow their businesses, I'm able to, which is such a benefit for me. And I don't think they understand how much they pour into me by having those conversations with them weekly. Just other opportunities to change the shape of our business. When they come up with an idea and we are able to bounce that idea back and forth and make it work for them, it's such a great mind share. And so those are where my 3 growth things come from.
And you mentioned you coaching, like, if people, even on this webinar, were looking for coaching, like, do you have any title company, like, is that something you ever take on too? Because you're an outside of the box thinker. I'd love to get coached by you. Do you have people is that open to people in the industry too? Oh,
it's open to people in the industry. I coach people outside of the industry. I've coached mortgage companies. I've coached eBay companies that have businesses on Etsy. It's just kind of across the board and wherever I fit. So I think just like with business, personalities have to match and you have to be able to understand that I'm a super high D. So if you're a sensitive soul, like we may not be a good fit, but I'll find a coach that's a good fit for you because I think coaching and having someone really just pour in your ideas, or if you're having a bad day, because as leaders, you can't pour your bad day into your team. You can't pour that in.
Right.
You can't let people know that there's cracks. I mean, there's a part of our humanity that we have to keep to ourselves. So having a coach is really a great place to like be able to I love my coach. Some days it's a therapy session and I'm like just diarrhea of the mouth like on him and he's like, all right, good session. All right, talk to you next week.
Well, and Andy, your email is going to be on the last slide. So anybody that's interested in just reaching out that way or just bouncing ideas, I'm sure they can hit you up that way. I think everybody now is thinking like Panera. I got to order Panera for closings and I got to read more. Yeah, Andy, you're just setting the bar. Brian, what do you think? Like, where are you pulling inspiration besides going to Nordstrom, and doing your meetings there? Like, how are you pulling inspiration?
Well, first of all, it's not fair that I go after Andy because she's an all-star. So that's very admirable. Secondly, I wish I could say I read a book a week, but I wouldn't be honest if I said that. I do read a lot, though. I too enjoy coaching and not only helping people reach their full ability, but helping them understand what their potential is. So as far as books, I read on a regular basis. The one book that stands out to me more than anything that I built the entire company on is by Jim Collins, From Good to Great, and it's essentially get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, the right people in the right positions, and go forward. And I don't think you could dummy it down any more than that. I don't think it matters what industry you're doing. That book I would highly, highly recommend. I too am crazy about podcasts, listen to them every morning. One thing I've learned, it maybe took me too long to learn this, but in our industry, probably like a lot, the business decisions are pretty easy. You insure or you don't. It's always the people. We don't manage people, we manage emotions. So to me, it's a constant self-educating on how do you deal with people? How do you read people? How do we better serve our staff? How do we better understand? How do you, Stephen Covey says, seek first to understand and then to be understood. It's one thing to say it, but to actually do it can be two different things. So it's listening to Tony Robbins has meant the world to me. I've learned so much to help me really engage with our staffs and their lives and their family and understand what they're going through in order to, I don't think we can sit here in our staff meetings and preach to our staff, you got to anticipate everybody's needs and you got to do this if we're not doing it for them. So that's my biggest focus, is making sure I can best serve my staff so they can in turn turn around and best serve our clients and their clients, the consumers.
That's great. We're talking about creating a remarkable closing experience and like how to make something worth talking about, which is kind of why I think this question is super important, because how are you coming up with the ideas that directly go into your business and your people? So thanks for sharing these things. We all can't be Andy Boland's reading 52 books in a year, but I think we could be somebody that reads Good to Great, in a year. I think we could listen to podcasts. I think there are certain things. So, and joining a mentor group. So thanks for sharing those two things. If anybody has questions, I'm sure they'll be hitting both of you up after this. The emails will be there. Now, the last point that we're going to take it home with is this. Third way to just be remarkable and create a closing experience that stands out. I think it's in the follow-up. It's staying in touch post-closing so that you remain top of mind for future referrals and deals. How are we doing that? And before I ask Andy and Brian kind of how they're staying in touch to remain top of mind, I want to hit up one of my buddies here in the industry. I'm sure a lot of you know Andrew Acker with D. Bello Associates. He has this thing, the customers versus referrals. I was talking to him recently about this, and one of the pull takeaway quotes I got from him was just this: a customer is always a referral source, but a referral source is not always a customer. And why that's important, I think, is just this. Referral sources must be stayed in touch with. We got to stay in touch with our best referral sources. It's not just about our customers. They could always be a referral source, but our referral sources, we have to stay in touch with them because they're not customers of ours, and they only think about us when we help them think about us, and when it's top of the mind, and when they go, I know a title company you should work with. So the difference between a customer and a referral, I think, is very big. And kind of to take the wrap-up point here that we're going to talk about is this: how do we own the handshakes and not just the billboards? How do we bring it back to the customer and the referral level to own those relationships? How do we own the handshakes? Brian, I know Andy started last time, and I'd love to give you the first chip at this one. How do you own the handshakes? How do you stay in touch post-closing to remain top of the mind? What does it look like at Unified?
Well, I learned a few years ago from a very, very good professional realtor in one of our markets that he taught me something called in the flow. And I said, what the heck is that? He says, well, here's the deal. He goes, he and his wife are a realtor team, and he goes, there's a couple they've known, they grew up with over the years. They had helped them buy and sell 7 homes over 20 some odd years. And all of a sudden he ran into him and they were talking, and they said, yeah, you have to come over. So they invited him over, and it was a different address. So what happened was they went ahead and bought another home without going through them. And he says, well, how did this happen? How do we not? He goes, I don't know. We met some people through another organization and became friends. And so I said, well, how'd you handle that? And he said, well, he goes, it's easy to get mad because that's what most realtors do. He goes, and I did get mad, but I got mad at myself because I realized we weren't in the flow with them. We did not do our job to stay in touch with them. Or, the other big thing that happens in our industry is we get to know people so well, we get to be friends. We start taking them for granted without realizing it. We don't say, hey, Mr. Realtor, how are we doing? Hit me, right? Tell me exactly how, what can we do better? What can we do more of? What do you say? I know we're friends, but put that aside. So we do something called In the Flow, and that's where each and every office throughout the state, once a quarter, we host something in our office to bring in as many of our clients and targets as possible. And it's not just meant to be a party. It's engaging, it's talking, it's asking these things. And then we also work off of a CRM, making sure we're not taking anybody for granted. I mean, if you're not first, you're last, and time goes by so fast. You could see somebody and then 6 months later go, oh my gosh, I haven't run into that person. So that's where the real managing comes in. We have to manage that process and making sure we're not overlooking anybody.
And Brian, I know everybody's ears perked up right there when you said those 3 letters, CRM. Can you share, like, what CRM are you using to say, like, to keep track of those touches? Like, what does that look? Because people always talk to me about which CRM should I use, and it sounds like you're getting some good results from it. What are you using?
We are, and the thing is, the CRM is not going to do your job for you. It's a tool and nothing more. We demoed a lot of CRMs. I won't mention any names of them, but some of them were very expensive. Some of them owned the data, so if you ever left them, you didn't have it. Some of them had a ton of really, really cool bells and whistles if you did a demo. But at the end of the day, I look and go, we're not going to be doing that. I don't want our sales team sitting behind their desk all day filling out reports. That's not what so we use something called Sugar. It's very, very effective. We're able to manually create our own fields. And if anybody wants to know more, I'm glad to share with them. But we've got in there a section for notes. So when people are, I've got somebody that supports our sales staff. So as our sales team is driving down the street, they can call in, text, or email and say, hey, just met with this person. Please put it on my calendar. I need to meet with them here. Here's what happened. They like baseball. They're married, 3 kids, blah, blah, blah. It helps us stay organized. And, again, garbage in, garbage out. So you have to monitor what's going in. And it's also a way for us to monitor our salespeople. I can look at it and say, you only input 4 people last week. You should have at least 10 a day. What's going on? What can I help you with? So Sugar.
Well, and I think Sugar now is just going to get a mad rush in the title. Jeremy, I think you need to hit them up to come to Alta One in the fall.
Yeah, they might. I wish we got a commission off of that, but we have nothing to do with them. And again, there's some really cool ones out there, but we don't need all the bells. I mean, simple is good. There's nothing wrong with simple.
Yep. Andy, do you want to kind of bring it home? Like, what are you doing now to stay in touch post-closing? What does that look like at Celebrity?
So in order to share like how we bring it home and stay in touch post-closing, I think that explaining kind of our process is really important about setting the expectation up front so that conversation at the end isn't uncomfortable. So, our dating process starts really with hot material. And as a HOP leader, I share that information with consumers and with agents and able to educate. So that gives us our first date, is like that standing and being able to own our space. Then because we have to focus on technology and where all these companies are going, we are able to use an app with Zachem that does earnest money. And from that, we use Close Simple that streamlines our pizza tracker. So it streamlines our process. Everyone's getting the same information. It doesn't matter who's out sick. It doesn't matter if somebody has an emergency, because every email looks like it's coming from the person it needs to come from. So there's not that hesitation to jump in someone's file. So there's not extra emails that don't belong to you and you're not really sure what happens. And then we get over to the new thing that's happening in our industry, which is remote online notarizations and closings. And so if we've made a commitment that we're going to be the company at the forefront of that, we have followed through. All of that being said, at the end of a transaction, when our success team is reaching out at the end to ask, how did everything go? Did we meet that's our question. Did we meet or exceed your expectations? And how do we do that? The week after, I spend an hour on Tuesdays and an hour on Wednesdays calling those exact same clients. There's something to be said for, I don't know why, because I don't feel like this, when they know the president of a company is calling them to ask them about their experience, and to stay top of mind with them, and to just say, if there's one thing, if you would rate us a 0 to 10, what would that be? And if they say a 9, I'm like, what could we have done differently to earn to be a 9.5? And if they could just give me that little smidgen of what a 9.5 looks like, that allows us to tweak our process a little bit more. And
that's awesome, Andy.
And not only do we focus on that business piece, but we also focus on, like I said, the relationship piece. So our success team does things like on a personal level with our client base. Like I've had agents who wanted to run marathons before. So I trained with them and I've run marathons with some of our clients. I've done 150-mile bike rides with clients who were like too afraid to take that leap by themselves. And I like volunteered, I'll do it with you. So it's constantly like a part of not just their vernacular when it comes to business, but their vernacular when it comes to like experiences that they have in their life.
That's awesome. Well, I think that kind of wraps up this point here, and I want to put it right back to the audience before we show the last slide. But what's one way, everybody watching this, that will help you stay in touch with your customers and referral sources? Is it going to be a CRM? Is it going to be more of like something Andy said with those personal follow-ups? I love that. We did not even hit on like Google reviews and Facebook, and there's so many options out there for like what post-closing looks like. But just kind of in wrapping it up, I think that's a good question. And the last thing I just want to ask is, what makes you remarkable? What's your purple cow? Every single title company, every single person in the industry that's watching this, what's your purple cow? Hopefully, by the end of this webinar here, each of you have been able to start thinking about what makes you unique, what makes you worth talking about. Andy, Brian, we got our emails at the bottom here if anybody wants to reach out. But could you maybe just say one thing, if there's just one takeaway, like a 10-second thing, like what's the most important thing that you would like to leave people with to make them remarkable? Andy, maybe start with you.
You have to care, and your team has to care. I think that's the difference. This isn't what we do for a living. Brian said at the very beginning, isn't sexy. I think it's exciting. Like I feel like a private detective half the time. And what makes you remarkable is really feeling like you're invested in their situation and their business.
Love it.
For me, it's very simple. It's caring.
Brian, how can you add to that? What's your one takeaway?
Well, I certainly can't argue with caring, because I think that's where everything starts. And, you know, from our standpoint, it's having a vision, because everything tends to be a moving target with our market. There's so many variables that affects our order levels and that kind of thing. It's creating and having such a vision and having such a drive and a passion to keep becoming who we want to become, how we want to be seen, how we want to perform, and attracting. I was talking to somebody the other day, and he says, you know, Brian, he goes, you really need to look at your staff roster once or twice a year. You need to look at your client roster once a year, and you need to imagine who might not be there in the future, and who are you going to replace them with? How are you going to constantly be looking forward? Because you know, so many of us are on such a rat wheel that you get in the office, life kicks in, and you're so busy, and all of a sudden it's 8 o'clock at night. We don't take time to put together a vision, much less implement it. So for me, it's having a constant vision of where we want to be in 6 months, a year, 3 years, and 5 years. And I've always got those things written down, because that's the only way I can hold myself accountable.
And have that meeting at Nordstrom where you do the vision casting.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Love it.
Exactly.
Well, hey, everybody, thank you all for taking an hour out of your day. And just leave you with that question: what makes you remarkable? You have each of our email addresses at the bottom here. If you have any questions or any thoughts, or if you just want to tell us a takeaway that you got from this, we'd love to hear it. So what makes you remarkable? Hopefully from this, you guys can take away something good, apply it to your business, and see you all at the next Alta event, and we'll talk about that remarkability factor. What is your purple cow? So,
Thank you.
Jeremy, thank you so much. Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody. Thank you, Andy, Brian. Jeremy, did you have anything else you wanted to wrap up with?
Yeah, just a few comments to wrap up. Yeah, thanks, Andy and Brian. Bill, some great tips on how to be that purple cow. We are at the top of the hour, actually, a little afterward. As Bill mentioned, please feel free to reach out to them directly if you have any questions. Andy, just like at Springboard, your Panera story got people sending comments. I'm not sure why you guys couldn't see them, so I apologize. There was another follow-up question as opposed to, in addition to asking if it affected your bottom line, you said you factor that into your expense to running a business. Are there any issues as far as respite issues, and if maybe a regular may view that as a kickback, buying lunch for your clients?
Well, it's not a respite. We everything that we do, like I will follow the rule, but I will straddle the line as much as possible. So I run everything by our attorney before we make a move. And because we're buying it for the buyer and the seller, like they're ultimately the person who should have picked the title company. So this is our way. We all buy food anyway. So if it's a violation, then we're gonna take all the snacks out. We're just making it a different experience because we're not giving them 3-hour-old pizza. We're giving them an option to not have a bag of chips, but to actually have something if it's their only meal of the day. So no, we ran it by compliance, ran it by our attorney, we're good. And it's my favorite, probably now. If you ask my team on a day where we have 30 closings, they're not amused by it. Let's just be honest. And yet, at the end, it's that experience that counts. And so they're really proud that that's who we have become in our market.
Yeah. Does that experience make your closing typically a little bit longer then? Maybe you have to factor that into as far as scheduling?
No, we don't. It doesn't make it longer. They have their food right away. They'll eat during the closing. And let's say that the lender isn't ready. It's a perfect opportunity for them not just to be sitting in a room, staring at a wall, watching a clock, like they're eating something. So we feel like you break bread with family. That's what we do on holidays. You go visit your family. So we don't want to, that's our extension of like breaking bread with you, is being able to provide that. And so hungry bellies make for unhangry people in the closing room. Or full bellies make for unhangry people in the closing room.
That's fantastic. Again, just a reminder, if you missed parts of today's webinar, if you think others in your office would benefit from listening, recording the presentation will be available tomorrow at alta.org/title topics. You also get an email with a direct link. Looking ahead to next month, we'll focus on commercial transactions, and we'll be discussing the most common endorsements that are used in these types of deals. And with that, that'll bring us to the conclusion of today's presentation. To wrap up, I do need to thank Fidelity once again for sponsoring our Title Topics webinars. I'd also like to remind everyone to make sure their company is confirmed in the ALTA registry. Being an ALTA member or being a Policy Forms license holder does not mean your company is automatically in the registry. So go to alta.org/registry for more information. Again, thank you to the speakers for sharing your insights on becoming that purple cow. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.